Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Depot Dive. I'm Ross McCorkle, and above me on the screen, a special treat this time for you guys. Josh Carney, our Joe Clark, normally on the show with me, is out sick. We've been having some unfortunate happenings here in the Depot world. We obviously missed last week's episode. My wife had her appendix give out on her, so we were in the hospital, so I apologize about missing a week. Joe will be back with me next week as normal, but this week we've got Josh. How's everything going for you, Josh?
Things are going well over here, knock on wood. Hopefully, they say bad things come in threes. So hopefully, I'm not the third one there. I'll be a little selfish and say that. So,
Well, you already
but
had
things are good.
yours. You already had
Yeah,
yours
that's
like a
true.
week ago.
Very
I don't
true.
if you want to talk a little bit about that. How's your head feeling?
I'm good now. We're at a point where the neck feels good, the head feels good. But yeah, beer league hockey supposed to be non-checking, and yeah, got taken out and had a little bit of a concussion there. So that was thrilling. But yeah, we're good. We're all
But,
good. Thanks
but,
for asking.
but my understanding is you had your teammates came to your defense. So
Very much so. It was classic beer league hockey. We had a nice little brawl there after a dirty play. So,
is there some volunteer ref that just has to break that up, or how does that work?
yeah. So the ref does get paid, but he basically, from what I understand, stood in the corner and was just like, "Have at it, boys." And eventually, eventually, it just became like, "Okay, we all have work in the morning. Let's just go back to our bench. We're not happy with the play. Josh is all right. Let's slide back and play." So, yeah, but I couldn't imagine being a ref in that situation. I would just lean against the boards and be like, "I'm not getting in there."
Fair enough. Well, the three topics we're going to talk about today. The Steelers have been busy signing some of their 2023 draft class. Nick Herbig, Darnell Washington, the first two to go. There's still a couple left remaining. We'll talk about all of that. And then we will talk about Roman Wilson. It feels like every year the hype train builds on him in the offseason. And so far, at least in his first 2 years, whether it was injury or just poor performance, he hasn't lived up to that hype. We're going to talk about that. And then we'll wrap things up, just closing out minicamp, putting a bow on mandatory minicamp with a kind of grab bag of random topics, random buzz from minicamp. If you want to have your question answered on a future episode, 412-254-3145, you can call and leave a voicemail, or you can text it if you don't want your voice on the show. That's totally fine. Just tell us your name, where you're from, a brief question, and we'll answer that on a future episode. Josh, Nick Herbig, $100 million, 4 years. That's $25 million average per year. $42 million guaranteed, though those guaranteed numbers are always kind of agent speak at first. We'll have to wait and see how the actual contract breakdown works out there. But let's just look at the $100 million number for now and kind of ignore the guarantees until we know more about it. But what was your initial reaction to that number? Was that an overpay? What was the? I've seen a lot of kind of negative reactions from some of the
Yeah.
fan base.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of negative reactions. I've seen a lot of questions of why are the Steelers paying three outside linebackers, premier money. My initial reaction was wow at the 100 million, but I totally understood it. It's a deal that gets you in on the ground floor with Nick Herbig. You're projecting that he's going to take off under Patrick Graham. There's going to be a larger role for him down the line. I'm very curious to see what it looks like when things come out from a contractual standpoint, what the breakdown looks like, what his cap hit each year is. But I'm glad it's done. I know that it was going to be a big topic. It was a big topic all offseason, especially leading into the draft, coming out of the draft. Are they going to trade him? Are they going to have him just play out the final year of his deal? I thought it was very fitting that Tuesday he said he had a desire to be a Steeler for life. That echoed the comments that his agent had made on Braden Fajoko's podcast a couple weeks ago. And then hours later, he's a Steeler for the foreseeable future. So very happy for Herbig. He's a heck of a story for the Steelers. I shared in an article yesterday. I had a column come out after they drafted him saying that they were making a mistake viewing him as an outside linebacker. He should be an off-ball guy. Very wrong on that. I've owned the L repeatedly on that, and I'm okay with that. But yeah, I wasn't too worried about the 100 million. That's just the going rate at a premium position, and he's young. I'm curious to see what they do with the three outside linebacker rotation here.
Yeah, I think that 25 million APY is 16th in the edge rushers right now,
Hmm.
pending that all the numbers checking out as they were reported. And yeah, like you said, that's the going rate. You look at what's happened since TJ Watt reset the market at 41 million. He already has three people above him, and Will Anderson Jr. is already 9 million
Yeah.
above him at 50 million. And so when you talk about the top of the market getting pushed that far north, you're talking about the average price going that far north. I think an important number to remember is that the franchise tag number for 2027, if it came to it with Herbig, say he had a good season and the Steelers didn't want to lose him, well, he was going to have access to the open market next year unless they applied the franchise tag. And that franchise tag number is projected to be, I think, 28.5 million. And so they're already kind of saving some money on that franchise tag number. And so you're kind of making the bet of, well, you're either going to lose him or you're going to have to kind of start your negotiating price at that franchise tag 28.5 million. And so, as long as everything works out, and there's some risk to it. Certainly, he's missed 6 games with hamstring injuries over the last 2 years. I think he's only played. I had the number. I don't have it off the top of my head. I think it's 12 of his 45 games where he's played 60% or more of the Steelers' total defensive snaps in a game. And so this is a guy who hasn't played a full season worth of starting snaps. I don't think anyone's ever gotten that kind of money, not having started a full season. So a lot of kind of unprecedented stuff when it comes to Nick Herbig, and the 100 million number just baffles people. Because, it took Ben Roethlisberger until the final 4 years of his career to make that much money per season. And he was a quarterback, and that was only... that wasn't that long ago. So, it just really speaks to the exploding nature of the salary cap. And Herbig, is just a product of the right time, right place, right time for him, really, because, it wasn't that long ago where he wouldn't have even sniffed the 100 million number. But if you look at some of the other contracts recently from this offseason, Jonathan Grenard, Jalen Phillips, Trayvon Walker, all of them got at least as much, and in 2 of those cases more than Nick Herbig APY. And, if you look at their numbers last year, I'm pretty sure Herbig outproduced every single one of them. And in less snaps in most cases there. I think even Boye Mafe, who, he was with the Super Bowl champs there, so you get kind of a Super Bowl tax, but I think he got 20 million, and he didn't have that impressive of a season. So just to prove the going rate for a starting, edge rusher is roughly what, Nick Herbig got. And I think we all think, at least I'll speak for myself, I think Nick Herbig can be one of the best in terms of if he has a full season of starting snaps. I crunched some of the numbers. You weren't here for this, but last year on the podcast a lot, I would talk about, all right, Nick Herbig's approaching, the kind of snap threshold where he's played a full season worth of snaps. If you average kind of TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith's full season worth of snaps when they're healthy for all 17 games, that comes out to about 930 on average. Nick Herbig's at 1,216, so he passed that mark last year. But if you kind of take his career production and kind of extrapolate it into a 930 snap format, he would have on pace for 12 and a half-ish sacks. And so you're getting a double-digit sack kind of guy, and I think that 25 million is totally okay for that. The big question with this, and you kind of hinted at it, is what does this mean for the outside linebacker room? What does this mean for Alex Highsmith? I think a lot of the buzz over the last 48 hours since the deal has happened is, are the Steelers going to trade Alex Highsmith? Or are they going to keep all 3? If they do keep all 3, well, surely, Highsmith or maybe TJ Watt is out of the door next offseason. What is your opinion on having 3? Are they going to move on from 1 before the start of the season? If not, who's the odd man out next year?
I'm all for keeping all 3, at least for 2026. You can never have enough pass rushers. It's a premium position. It's a quarterback-driven league, and you need to have guys that can get after the quarterback. The Steelers have that. They've built a certain way defensively. It would make no sense for them right now to pay Nick Herbig and then turn around and trade Alex Highsmith. Yes, Alex Highsmith struggles to stay healthy throughout seasons. It's been, his biggest issue in the NFL at this point. But I think the way this plays out is 2026 is the last year for all 3. And then I believe Highsmith, his dead cap hit is like $5 million next year. I don't think there's any guarantees left on his deal next year. So I think this would be a position where they can move on from Highsmith after this season, get a draft pick for him, You hopefully you have another year of development with Jack Sawyer, and then maybe you draft another edge defender in 2027 later in the draft. But I think you have to go into this year with all three. Patrick Graham has to have a plan to get all three on the field, and you let it take care of itself. If Highsmith goes down with another injury and Herbig steps up and is that dominant force again, then maybe Highsmith moves into that rotational role. Or, this could be a way to limit TJ Watt's snaps early in the year so that he's fresher later in the year, and help him make that push for the playoffs. So I see no way that they move on from one of Highsmith or Watt before the start of 2026. And I certainly don't think that they would move on from one of them at the trade deadline. I think this is something that, Omar Khan got this deal done. We're going to do this for 2026. We're not paying a ton of money to a quarterback just yet. We'll have a ton of money wrapped up in the outside linebacker room for 1 year. And then next offseason, we'll look to move Highsmith. So I think it's going to work out. I think they have an innovative defensive coordinator. You've heard Mike McCarthy talk about how they've been planning, unique packages for Herbig since he got the job in January. So there's a plan in place. It's a little frustrating to hear some of the analysts talking about how this is just classic Steelers and they're making a mistake and everything, because if they were to let him walk, or trade him, they'd be getting crushed for making a mistake, not paying Herbig. So keep all three, figure it out next year.
Yeah, have people already forgotten about the Derek Tuskas of the world and that season of Malik Reed playing like 400 snaps, and just there was a long time where the Steelers didn't have a third edge rusher, and how many times did that just hurt badly? So you can never have too much talent at that position, especially in Pittsburgh's 3-4. It's probably the most important position on the defense, and that's why they're paid like that. And yeah, I mean, the one thing I'll maybe push back on a little bit is the trade deadline thing. I mean, I don't think anyone expects the Steelers to be hurting at the trade deadline, but if they are, in a world where
you could see it.
Yeah, you could see somebody maybe getting dealt. That 2027 draft class is pretty loaded. I think a lot of people thought Pittsburgh would maneuver some of their 12 picks and try to parlay that into some 2027 picks. Well, they didn't, and they're not expected to get anything in the way of compensatory picks. And so really the only way to recoup that is to maybe trade something at the deadline at this point. And yeah, so I think that there's a possibility, but I mean, it's kind of hard to project that far out. So many things could happen. I mean, Aaron Rodgers could go down in training camp, God forbid, and we could be talking about a whole different thing. You might even trade him, Highsmith before the season if that happens. I think because the Steelers brought back Rodgers, they're very clearly all in on this season, and all in doesn't look like trading away one of your best defensive players, which is, I mean, Alex Highsmith probably was the best defensive player, maybe Joey Porter Jr. in that conversation with him last year. So, yeah, I agree. You probably don't want to trade him right now. A lot of people want to see TJ Watt traded. I get the impulse just because he's had a couple of rough years, but I mean, just the mathematics of it all don't work out. This is going to be his age 32 season, I think. Mm-hmm. And his contract is not like Myles Garrett's contract. Myles Garrett had a lot of dummy years, voidable years on his contract. And his average, his base salary was pretty low given what his contract size was. I think TJ Watt's base salary is like $32 million the next couple of years. So if Pittsburgh wanted to trade him, they'd have to get into a situation where they're paying some of the salary, or some kind of restructure where you're just taken on a lot more dead money than you want to be taken on. And are you even going to be able to get a first for Watt? I think there's a whole debate to be had there that I don't really want to get into right now. But just to say, I don't think that the trade TJ Watt crowd, I'm sorry, it just doesn't make any sense.
And also, just the one rant I'll have on it quickly is like, yes, the Browns traded Myles Garrett, but the Steelers are not the Browns.
Right.
Just because the Browns traded their premier pass rusher and got a draft haul for it to help reset doesn't mean that the Steelers should do that. Nor would they. Like, Watt's going to be a one helmet guy, and trying to draw the comparison between how the Browns are doing business under Andrew Berry to what the Steelers should be doing is just, it's short-sighted for me, and it's apples to oranges.
Agreed. The other contract given out, we said it earlier, Darnell Washington, this one $42 million over 4 years. So that's what, 10.5 average per year, $21 million guaranteed, at least the reported number there. So he got, at least off the reported numbers, he got half of what Herbig got in guarantees. I think this makes him the, what is it? I think it's 12th in terms of all tight ends, APY for contracts. He's at 10.5. Pat Fryermuth's at 12.1. And so, yeah, Darnell Washington being paid like a top tight end. And what do you think about that? I mean, last year he emerged as more of a receiving threat. I think he's been one of the best blocking tight ends in the league for a while, and that's only gotten better. Obviously coming off that injury at the end of last year, but no long-term concerns there. There's some concerns that the beat writers like to talk about his knees a lot. I don't know about you, but watching him hurdle some of these guys, I think his knees are totally fine. But that's just me.
Yes.
Your reaction to the Darnell Washington deal, and maybe just in general, giving out 2 deals like in 48 hours and really a couple more still on the docket that we'll talk about here shortly.
I was stunned at this deal. Not that I'm upset by it. I was stunned that it was that much and it was that quickly to Darnell Washington. I think it was Mark Cabali who had the report last night that things came together very quickly on this in the final few hours. Yeah, paying Darnell Washington like this, coming into this season with Mike McCarthy as head coach, I was kind of questioning Darnell's fit in that 11 personnel offense because he's more of that traditional inline blocker. He's not a guy that you're going to line up in the slot or out wide. He doesn't have a diverse route tree that tight ends that McCarthy has had in the past, like Jake Ferguson comes to mind from Dallas, Dalton Schultz early in his career in Dallas. Darnell kind of reminds me more of the Mercedes Lewis that McCarthy has had in Green Bay at times. But I didn't think that Washington's deal was going to be this big. I am happy he's locked up long term. I think that last year, when they finally utilized him as tight end one, the offense was a lot better. They could do multiple things out of multiple formations. But I'm honestly I'm very surprised at the structure of this deal as we see it now at 42 million with half of that guaranteed. He's a premier blocking tight end. Don't get me wrong. He did break out a little bit as a receiving tight end, but it just feels like what we saw last year might be the ceiling for Darnell as a true offensive weapon. And I don't know if that right now is worth that 10.5 million. Maybe that ages well and he gets bumped down from 12th to maybe outside of the top 15, maybe top 20 eventually. But yeah, I was very surprised at the dollar amount, and I was shocked at how quickly it came together after Herbig.
Yeah, and the devil's in the details with the contracts here. Sometimes, maybe it'll be backloaded or whatever. I mean, maybe the Steelers will be able to get out of it after a couple of years pretty easily. We'll have to just wait and see in that regard. But yeah, you see what Charlie Kolar, some of these other blocking guys got 8.1, somewhere in that range. I would have expected more than that for him, probably landing around 9 for Washington, 10.5. I mean, it's $1.5 million on the where the salary cap is these days. Isn't that much more, but it is still, when you look at the grand scheme of being the 12th highest paid tight end, certainly people are going to have questions about that just given his receiving production. People don't necessarily watch the blocking aspect of the game unless you're kind of watching the tape or see some of the highlight blocks. Sometimes that stands out, but his value, I think, in the new and evolving NFL where teams are kind of the pendulum swinging back to maybe more 2-3 tight end looks, jumbo packages, kind of smash mouth football. He's the real, just kind of trump card that the Steelers can lay out that no other team really has anybody like him. That he can be out there on rundowns, he can be out there on pass downs. You're not putting in probably your Charlie Kolars on a pass down, or at least you're going to be hurting kind of your potential scheme that you can run, your potential route trees you can run. If you do with Washington, that's not the case. He can be a good receiving threat. I think he earned the trust of Aaron Rodgers last year, and that's why they paid him that much. And I'm personally glad that he's gonna stick around, just because I do think what Omar Khan said it best: if he could have 20 Darnell Washingtons, he would have 20 Darnell Washingtons. So that probably told us all we needed to know back when he said that at the Combine, I think it was. So who else gets an extension? Porter Benton, maybe Queen is in that conversation. I don't know. Who else is going to get one?
Yeah, I think that's kind of it at this point. I would be shocked if they even broach the subject with Queen. I know he mentioned, is it last week, where he said that there were some talks here and there, and he saw the whole quote unquote charade of the trade rumors. It just feels like he's entering his final year, and they're just going to do business with him and move on. I would expect Porter to be next. I don't know that I'm prioritizing Keanu Benton right now, just because I don't think he's that needle mover as a nose, and I don't think he has enough experience as that interior defensive lineman and sub package to truly pay moving forward. Whereas Porter, it's I don't want to say easy, but it's a clean projection of he's CB1, he's ascending, he's coming off of a great season. Whereas Benton, trying to read between the lines with Domata comments about how his role could change some and he'll place him outside and Yaya Black, or excuse me, YA Black. I pulled a Yinzer there. YA Black could be a true dominant nose. It just kind of it had me putting the tinfoil cap on there. It's like what's going on with Keanu Benton? So Porter is the easy, clean projection to be the next guy to get that extension, and that's the one that I'm kind of bracing for because I think it's going to be a lot, and I think it's going to raise a ton of eyebrows. But he's got to be the logical one next, right?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, there's been some reports that, talks are in progress for both of those guys. I think that's obvious. I think basically the front office is in talks with any extension candidate.
Right.
It just depends what kind of offer they're putting on the table. We've seen how fast things can come together. I wouldn't even be surprised if we get off this podcast and see some news, some more extension news at this rate. So, but I don't know. You look back to the Javon Hargrave, just the way he exited, and he went and had a nice little career in Philly and San Francisco and Minnesota last year. They're not the exact same player by any means, but Benton last year had 5.5 sacks. Kind of the quietest 5.5 sacks you'll probably ever see. But for an interior defensive lineman, that's nothing to sneeze at. If you look at Javon Hargrave's high with the Steelers, it was 6.5 in 2018, and there was quite a bit of hype around Hargrave back then. He got quite a nice deal. I think the interior defensive linemen get paid, quite a bit, and so seeing what these other guys have got paid so far, I'd be a little bit almost scared to see what Benton might be asking for at this point. But yeah, I get your concern. If they're not going to play him in the position that he's been playing and going to start experimenting with him being, out wide a little bit more, or not out wide, but, more 4-eye and 3 tech, it's just maybe a little too much projection for my taste at this point. But, man, the Steelers are going to have to do another high investment draft pick in the defensive line once again next year if they don't keep him. Not next year, but next year, right?
Yeah, next year. So that is the only real concern I have is if you don't extend him, you're basically setting yourself up again to invest a potential high draft pick. Maybe it's not first round, but second, third round in another interior defensive lineman. And then you have to reset that whole developmental clock again. And does that fit the window that this team is in currently? Maybe not. We'll have to see what that defensive line class looks like when we get to that point. But like you said, it's a significant projection for me of, we're going to pay this guy based off of what we think he can be. But then you have the coaching staff consistently the last few years getting questions about what his actual role is. I know that, in the last 2 years, Carl Dunbar was adamant Keanu Benton stays at nose tackle. Mike Tomlin was adamant Keanu Benton stays at nose tackle. Now we get new eyes. Well, he could play all over. It's like, well, he hasn't done that. So, yes, he had a solid year at the back end, finishing with those 5.5 sacks. I know at the beginning of the year, he was really rough as a run defender. There were calls for him to be benched for Black. But just with how interior defensive linemen with some pass rush juice are getting paid, I'm a little concerned when it comes to Benton, and I don't have any of those concerns with Porter.
So your official prediction there is no for Benton, yes for Porter, and no for Queen, right?
Yeah, that's where I'm at right now. I think that's a fair way to summarize it. Would I be shocked Benton gets an extension? No. I personally wouldn't do it unless there's a specific plan for him, and we haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, and for the same reasons that defensive line, the inside linebacker also worries me. Queen, I don't have the highest opinion of him necessarily as a starting, kind of green dot guy. I don't think he's been excellent. I think he's been okay. But the Steelers didn't draft any inside linebackers despite really looking through the draft class for one. And so where does that put you next year? If you're losing Benton and Queen, the middle of your defense suddenly becomes a big issue. And maybe that's fine because the Steelers are going to be in rebuild-ish mode. Rodgers most likely gone. And, you're kind of just in what do we have with Aller and Howard at that point mode. And so maybe it's okay to rebuild the interior of the defense for a little bit. But man, you look at what happened to Mike McCarthy in Dallas. He got stuck in the exact same spot. They were always looking for an inside linebacker. It felt like the entire time he was there, they were drafting inside linebackers. They were getting hurt. It's kind of similar in the interior defensive line. They took Mozzie Smith. That was a disaster. So I hope there's not a repeat of that in Pittsburgh because the Steelers have been getting gashed up the middle of their defense for a while, and right when maybe they have a chance to be good, resetting all of that would suck. So I don't know. I kind of am open to one of the two getting extended. I don't even know which one. Probably I would lean Benton if I had to choose. All right, we'll move into the second topic here, and we'll kind of breeze through these because we spent a lot, and deservedly so, on the extensions. But Roman Wilson, once again, a topic of discussion in the offseason, mandatory minicamp. I'll set the stage. I think it was according to beat writers, one of the last plays of mandatory minicamp on Wednesday because today is Kennywood Day. So the actual last practice was on Wednesday. Roman Wilson caught a deep bomb from Aaron Rodgers in stride. Some say it was 50 yards. Some say it was 70 yards. We'll just call it 55 or 60 maybe to be conservative because that is quite the heave from Rodgers through the air. But he caught it, and the buzz is that the chemistry is improved. And what was the one thing we were looking for from Roman Wilson? It was for the chemistry to improve because the leading theory is that Aaron Rodgers didn't trust him, and that's why he didn't play much last year. And so are you buying this new buzz? Are you still hesitant? Where are you with Roman Wilson? Are you kind of once bitten, twice shy with him?
I'm still a believer in Roman Wilson, and I think that now there is an offensive-minded coaching staff in place that he'll have more opportunities. I do worry about the chemistry with Rodgers. It's good to hear right now that things are looking good in minicamp. Obviously, what really matters is the games, and it felt like last year they could never get on the same page. It felt like if it wasn't Calvin Austin receiving the brunt of Rodgers' frustration, it was Roman Wilson when he had a helmet. They never really got on the same page. I know that Roman had the two nice games against Green Bay and Los Angeles, scored touchdowns in both. But it was tough to see him be a healthy scratch late in the year and lose snaps to the likes of Adam Thielen and Marquez Valdes-Scantling. But I'm not giving up on Roman. I think that he's said and done all the right things in recent years when he's dealt with injury or being a healthy scratch. He was on the Christian Coons podcast a couple weeks ago. And, he said that healthy scratch was an opportunity for him to sit back and readjust his preparation and how he was seeing the game and how he was studying and everything. So he's doing all the right things. And, teammates have noticed that too. I know that, Kuntz has talked highly of him throughout the offseason on his podcast, saying that, Roman was doing all the right things behind the scenes, putting in a ton of work that people don't see. So I'm still in on Roman Wilson. I just hope that Rodgers gives him a real chance this year. I do think, obviously, being in a more open offense under Mike McCarthy will certainly help. The Steelers are going to try and score points this year offensively rather than try to not make mistakes and protect the football, which is refreshing. And I think Roman has showed flashes of being able to make some plays. So having a better receiver room around him with some veteran leaders, I think could really, really help him take that next step.
I think or maybe not most, but a good portion of the fan base is kind of expecting Jeremy Bernard to step into that wide receiver 3 role. Right now, at least, it seems like Roman Wilson is the clear wide receiver 3, but that's to be expected at this point in the offseason. Would it be a bad sign? How bad of a sign would it be? Would it be a bad sign for Roman Wilson or a good sign for Jeremy Bernard if Roman ends up as the 4 and Bernard as the 3?
That's a great question. I think it would be a good sign for Bernard. I don't. It would have to depend on how it played out. Like if Roman looks terrible in training camp, like obviously very bad sign. But if Jeremy's out there making plays and has a real connection with Rodgers, like the Steelers traded up to get him for a reason. And if he becomes the wide receiver 3 and Roman's a solid 4, that just makes the room better. And I don't think I would panic if Bernard struggled. Historically, rookie receivers do tend to have a tough transition to the NFL unless your name is Malik Neighbors or Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson, insert star receiver here. Um, you know, I think if Bernard has some struggles and Roman seizes upon that and is making some plays, I think that could be a good thing too. So it really just depends on how they look in training camp and preseason and how things really play out there. The worst case scenario is they both are struggling, and it went from, hey, we've invested heavily in the receiver room and we feel good about it, to now we have 2 dependable veterans and major question marks from 3 to 5 or 3 to 6 offensively. So that's going to be a fascinating one to play out. And again, Roman has said the right things. He said that he's willing to help Jeremy with whatever he needs, and he's an open door policy with him. So I'm hoping that this is the year everything comes together for Roman, and he quiets a lot of the doubters in the first 2 years that he's had to deal with.
Yeah, let's hope we're not talking about looking for another veteran, as it seems like it happens every year around this time and through training camp. Because honestly, the cupboard's getting a little bare. Juju signed and Odell signed, and I don't really know if I'm super interested in what's left out there. Maybe
what veteran receiver is out there that they're going to trade for at the deadline that will retire immediately at the end of the season?
Right, exactly. Well, hey, Thielen said he's open to coming back if Rodgers comes back, so don't rule that out.
Oh, please no. Please no.
Yeah, but Roman Wilson been putting in extra work on the jugs machine after practice, and everything you're hearing is good from him. But I will remind everybody that this time last year, Mark Cabali said, I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but he said, I have been hearing more buzz about Roman Wilson than any player I've ever heard buzz about. So that set a very high bar for Roman Wilson buzz, and obviously fell flat. So I don't blame anybody one bit if they are hesitant on Roman Wilson. But boy, would it be great for this roster if he does pan out. You all of a sudden have, one of the most dynamic receiving rooms in the league. Not the most dynamic, because there's a couple that are just crazy in the league right now, but certainly one of the best. And give the offense a real chance to actually be good for the first time. And gosh, it's been like a decade. So
yeah,
we're going to quickly go through the other random minicamp topics, of which there are several. This one was kind of interesting. We talked about the outside linebacker room. Jack Sawyer reportedly looks like he's added 15 pounds of muscle. Already a big guy, probably the biggest guy in that room in terms of pound for pound, just kind of girth. If you're adding 15 pounds of muscle, he's almost into DeMarvin Leal territory. Is that?
Oh no!
I was looking at the listed weight, and I was like, oh man, if he actually added 15 pounds of muscle. Of course, this wasn't a scientific measurement. This was Mark Cabali just kind of eyeballing him and saying, basically just saying he looks good, his physique looks improved. So that's good news, I think. However, if he truly did add 15 pounds, then you are up in the kind of, that's a little bit overweight there for an edge. But I don't know. Do you think Jack Sawyer played a lot more than anybody thought he would in rookie year? Because, you had the popped lung, you had Highsmith's various ailments, you had Herbig's hamstring for a couple there. So Sawyer ended up playing way more than anybody thought he would, and had that strip sack in the playoffs.
Yes, he did.
I thought he did. As the season wore on, he fared well. Didn't have a ton of pass rush juice, but he wasn't like a total liability when he was in there. And I thought, overall, by and large, including his special teams play, a pretty decent rookie season. Can we expect Jack Sawyer to? Gosh, you're now paying 3 guys that much money. Is Jack Sawyer's role going to decrease?
I don't know if it decreases. I think you're going to see a decrease in snaps if everyone is healthy, but I wonder if his role shifts more towards, occasionally an early down guy. And that's maybe why he's putting on that 15 pounds of muscle. He was a good run defender last year. As you mentioned, there was no real pass rush juice. So I do wonder if it's possible that he's putting on weight to help him defend the run and withstand some of the the beating that he takes on special teams. I think he played over 350 snaps on special teams last year,
Yeah,
and then
double
I
digit
think it was
tackles.
yeah, and I think it was over 300 snaps defensively as well. So I do wonder if that added muscle that Kabali noted could help him as an early down rotational guy, allowing those three others to stay fresh for obvious pass rushing situations. Because Jack's just not there yet when it comes to rushing the passer.
We talked about the outside linebacker room. TJ Watt
Mm-hmm.
was asked about moving around the defense. It's felt like that's a topic of discussion for the last couple years because of how much teams are chipping him and doubling him, and he's kind of fallen off a cliff. He hasn't really figured out a way to overcome that, at least consistently, where he's having those high double digit sack seasons that we're used to from him. And so a lot of talk was about how much are they going to move Watt around, and there was a little, but man, not nearly enough. And this year, it seems like that is going to change. Watt admitted that the reason he wasn't moving is because he was a little bit stubborn. And this year, he basically insinuated he doesn't have a choice. It sounds like the versatility buzzword that gets thrown around a lot in Pittsburgh these days. They actually mean that this year, whereas everybody along the defensive front is basically going to have to know every position, and they're going to rotate those guys all around everywhere. So, do you think that we see a big increase in production for Watt because of this? Is this a bounce back year, or is it going to be kind of maybe a more popcorn where everybody has decent stats because they're just rotating around so much?
I think it's going to be a lot of popcorn where guys are producing because they're moving around a lot. I hope that we get some news that Watt has reached out to a guy like Max Crosby and kind of got some insight on how Patrick Graham utilized him and moved him around. I obviously Watt in his career has built his Hall of Fame resume rushing from one side, playing on one side consistently, but teams have adjusted in the last few years, and it's become much easier to scheme against him with the chips and the double teams and all of that and sliding protections. And the Steelers just never had that defensive scheme and versatility to change things up. And now, I thought it was very fitting how Watt answered that question yesterday, where it was, you know, it's built into the scheme. I don't have a choice. And it wasn't like he was saying it in a negative way. It sounded like he was very open to it and excited by it. So I'm hoping it helps him bounce back. I know that it can be difficult for some guys to rush from one side compared to the other. It's different hand usage, different footwork. But at this point in his career and coming off of the tough year that he had last year, Watt needs to be open and willing to try and evolve. And this was a positive first step with this answer to the media.
Moving into the secondary, staying on defense, Daylen Everette, third round rookie, kind of the forgotten guy in this draft class until recently. He's been getting a good amount of buzz over the last, week and a half, just his performance throughout OTAs and minicamp. And man, they put him against DK Metcalf because Joey Porter Jr. has obviously been kind of holding in, not participating in those portions of practice. And that's created room for a guy like Daylen Everette to kind of trial by fire, putting him up against DK Metcalf, apparently holding his own pretty well. I think he may have been actually in there maybe when the big Roman Wilson, I read this earlier. I think he was in there when the big Roman Wilson catch happened that we talked about earlier. And so, he's taking his lumps like any rookie's going to, but apparently also kind of running step for step with DK Metcalf down the field. He has that 4.3, I can't remember the exact number, speed, and, kind of showing that off. Do you think Everett is an actual candidate to be the first guy off the bench at corner, or is it more going to be, Asante Samuel? And I'm just kind of surprised that Everett's as far along, seemingly, obviously without pads on, as he is right now.
I am too, honestly. I thought this was a piece to take a shot on as a developmental guy. I am surprised he's getting as much buzz as he is right now and as much run as kind of that first guy off the bench. I do think as we get into training camp and preseason, it'll be Asante Samuel Jr. Just because of his experience and his versatility. But Daylen Everette's kind of that forgotten guy in this class, but fits the mold of what they've looked for at the position in recent years. And he's got a couple of good players that have similar styles to him in Joey Porter Jr. and Jamel Dean to learn from. And it's encouraging that he's hit the ground running here early on. But I wouldn't read too much into it till we get into training camp and see how he does, when the pads come on. But this is certainly an encouraging step forward for a guy that I kind of viewed as that the developmental piece that break glass in case of emergency this year. And he might be more than that based off of how he started out here.
Pittsburgh finally signed Darnell Savage, the safety. It was announced, way back at the start of free agency.
Yeah.
Hinted at least. He never signed. I think there was some kind of medical thing holding it up. And finally they signed him. Probably a good thing because that safety room is really, I mean, if they sustain another Elliott injury or something like that, it's a little better of a situation with Brisker in town now. You're not going to be playing your Chuck Clarks of the world. And who's the other guy? Juan Thornhill, my goodness. But still it's going to be a tough situation. So bringing Savage in probably helps. They also signed just today Robert Tonyan, tight end, and former first-round draft pick Jamin Davis. I think he was the 19th overall selection to the Washington football team in just 2021. And so this is kind of a young, high pedigree guy. Couple of interesting signings. Anything to say on those guys? I know Tonyan was a former McCarthy Rodgers guy, so an interesting connection there.
Yeah, a couple weeks ago, mid-May, I had put out 3 key positions that the Steelers needed to address before training camp, and tight end was number 2 on that list. And Tonyan was a guy that I had highlighted because of the McCarthy and Rodgers connection. He's struggled to stay healthy in recent years. He's had a major dip in production from 2020 when he had 11 touchdowns. But he's a nice number 3 projection tight end at this point behind Washington and Freiermuth. We'll see how much juice he has left, but it made all the sense in the world that they brought him in as a tryout and ultimately made the move. Jamin Davis, I'm interested to see what his role is. I believe based on video from OTA or from minicamp, he was working with the outside linebackers.
Oh, okay.
I believe I might have to go back and look at that, but I know that he kind of was that hybrid guy in college and did some of that with Washington as well. But yeah, I mean, those are 2 nice players to take a shot on as bottom of the roster depth pieces that could come in and push for a spot in training camp. But Darnell Savage was the one that when it was finally announced, it was like, okay, thank goodness that's done. I feel a lot better about the 4th safety position because last weekend when I did my way too early 53-man roster predictions, it was Sebastian Castro or Robert Spears Jennings as the 4th safety. And I was like, I don't feel good about this at all. And that's no knock on either of those players. I think they could both be really good special teams pieces, but to have them as the potential first safety off the bench in case of injury just was a little nerve-wracking. So I like the business that the Steelers did with some of these veterans. They're shoring up some positions of need. And I think Tonyan and Savage both make the roster, and it'll be interesting to see where Davis is working moving forward, whether that's inside or outside.
All right, those are our topics for the show. We're going to move into our listener question to wrap things up. Again, 412-254-3145. If I spoke too fast, that's in the show notes wherever you're watching this. This one from a frequent caller, Brett in San Angelo, Texas.
Hello, Depot Dive. This is Brett from San Angelo. And my question is a little more of a talking point. That is that there's a player that on the roster right now that basically no one is talking about at all this offseason. And I guess my kind of question is wondering why. And that one is Carson Bruener. So obviously the assumption is he's going to be a special teams player, Peter's role last year. That's probably true. But if I remember right, he was a 4-year starter in college. He has over 400 tackles, and there's every reason to think that he's going to advance on defense. And in fact, to me, I'd love to hear your thoughts. To me, I think that he could fall into that role of that downhill thumper to come in on rundowns and maybe a guy like Harrison expendable. I think that'd be a pretty reasonable expectation. Anyway, so no one's talking about it. I would love to hear your thoughts to see if you agree that, hey, maybe he can make a guy like Harrison expendable and, carve out a role on defense.
All right. Thank you, Brett, for the question about Carson Bruener. And we have the perfect guy on the show. This is Josh interviewed, I believe, him at the, was it at the Shrine Bowl you interviewed him? You had a chance to talk to him. And
yes,
you were kind of high on him entering the draft last year. And lo and behold, they picked him, and he's been one of your guys. So have at it.
Yeah, I do think he's being slept on a little bit as a defensive player. Obviously, we saw what he did last year on special teams. And it was right away in his preseason debut. I think he had a tackle on the opening kickoff against the Jaguars, and it just built from there. I think he's definitely a candidate to be the special teams captain this year. But I think he can be more than just that special teams ace. He was a solid 3-down linebacker at Washington in his final year. His first 2 years, he did, have that rotational role with the Huskies, and he would come off the field on 3rd down situations, but showed he could be, that early down guy in the Pac-12, and then obviously in the Big Ten in his final year. But I do think he's being slept on a little bit, and I think another year in the NFL, again, he's going to have to learn another scheme a bit, but he's been around the track one lap, as Mike Tomlin liked to say. This will be his second one, around the track. So I do think he could fill in as that downhill thumper, a high volume tackle guy that could push Malik Harrison, honestly. Ideally, the Steelers just keep the 5 that they have this year and roll with it, and let the rules play out as they will. But I do think moving forward, he's a guy that you cannot sleep on as that potential rotational rundown linebacker.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk in the NFL about earning your keep on special teams, and some guys never progress beyond being a special teamer, and you can carve out a nice long career. The Tyler Metikeviches of the world, the Miles Killebrews of the world, the list goes on really of guys that have done that. But there's also a fair amount of those guys that progress into actual defensive players. Look at James Pierre, what he turned into. He got a pretty nice contract over there. Where'd he go? Washington, I think.
Minnesota. Brian Flores, Minnesota.
That's right. And so, yeah, I think Bruener, absolutely. I think I did the rookie report last year and highlighted, a couple plays every week for every rookie. And Bruner's special teams tackles, of which he had 19, very close to that 20 mark, which is crazy for a first-year player on special teams there. You look at the quality of those tackles, it wasn't just him running by guys and taking good angles. There were a fair amount where he was, stacking, taking on a block, shedding. I mean, exactly the type of thing you like to see from your inside linebackers, what you'd need to do on defense. And so I think that the quality of his tackles on special teams speak to a guy who could translate that to defense. So good call, Brett, for bringing up Carson Bruener. He hasn't been getting talked about on defense. I don't know how much that's going to happen this year, but certainly what we were talking about earlier, the Steelers may be losing both Malik and Patrick Queen. You're going to be down to just Peyton Wilson and probably drafting some guys. Bruener might really get a pretty solid chance in 2027, especially if he kind of continues progressing the rate he has. So good call out there. All right, well, that is everything for our show today. I thank you to Josh Carney for sitting in with me. Joe Clark will be back next week. You can follow me on Twitter at Ross_McCorkle. You can follow him at by Josh Carney, I think. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And we'll be back next Thursday afternoon. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.